The recording.
Oh, it's already started.
And if you want to reread.
Hi, our group project will talking about deer in Indiana. As you know, white-tailed deer are very common throughout Indiana. It started in 1943. The population estimate at 900 deer. Jumped to 1951. First deer season started, and it was 3 days in November. Since then, deer season started. 1975, deer harvest near 9,000 deer. And 1985, deer harvest exceed 32,000. It jumped up really quick since then. The deer are their prime at 3 to 6 years of age. They may live to 20 years or more capacity, captivity. But in the wild, white-tailed deer was live to age 10 and considered old. About weight, an average adult male deer will weigh 175 pounds, while a female deer will weigh 120 pounds. They can run really fast. They can speed up to 35 miles per hour and can jump up to 9 feet. It's really high. As you know, they are blind, color blind. They see everything in a gray shape. But in the other hand, they can see color through blue, green, and yellow. But they cannot see in orange and red. That's it really general knowledge about deer, white-tailed deer in Indiana. Now Alex will tell us some more information about inhabitants.
Deer like to live in many types of environments. They like to live in a mixture of hardwoods, croplands, brushlands, and pasture lands. They're very cautious when they're in their environment. They like to go out in the evenings and in the mornings to open fields and meadows. And then they only go out to the open fields and meadows if they're in a woodland area that has a lot of thick brush and trees. They prefer to live in the open woodland, but are often found on the fringes of urban areas and in farming country, and many people will see them when people are harvesting their crops running across the field. Their habitat also includes areas along streams and rivers. They like to stay along the streams and rivers because it's a good drinking source and there's a lot of food that grows around there. They also like to live on farms. You see a lot of people will see them out in their farmyards, next to the animals out there in the pasture fields. And they also like to live in very thick, like super thick environments. That's where they like to bed down in the evenings and then during the day. And then we're going to go on to what deer like to eat.
Okay, what do white-tailed deer like to eat? Well, in the wild and in the summer, they pretty much eat the same things. They like to eat fruit, like apples, the blueberries, blackberries, persimmons, but they also like to eat hickory nuts, pecans, acorns, and beechnut acorns. Some of the wild deer will even eat grass, bark, and twigs. During the winter, they feast on buds and twigs of woody plants. It's not good for them to eat new foods in the middle of the winter, especially in great quantities, because it can be more harmful to a deer than not feeding them at all. When they're looking for food in gardens and fields, they prefer to eat corn or soybeans and cowpeas, which cowpeas is another name for black-eyed peas. And it's due to the black or brown ringed hilum around the pea. The cowpea is also called a hungry season crop because it's the first crop to be harvested before cereal crops like the corn and other grains. It's fresh or dried seeds, pods, and leaves are commonly used as a human food, but deer like them pretty much too. A deer will eat up to 2 pounds of dry food for every 100 pounds of their body weight. The deer are also ruminants. They regurgitate half of their digestive food, other words called cud, and they chew it again and swallow it. If a deer is in captivity, they usually eat hay. But a common problem with deer in captivity is overfeeding them grain, and because their digestive systems can't handle it, the highly fermentable grains, the result is usually death. If they don't die, they can develop gastric ulcers and other infections. And if you have a deer in captivity that you're feeding, besides hay, you can give them alfalfa pellets or a combination pellet, whatever you can find at different animal stores that deal with deer. Now we're going to find out more about their mating season. And here's Darin.
Hello, I'll be talking to you about white-tailed deer seasons. We will be discussing what a deer season is, the age, and the usual months and behaviors associated with being in season. First, we're going to start off with seasons. What is a season, you may ask? Well, for males, the male goes into rut, which is caused by a heightened levels of testosterone and a heightened control on the melatonin. For females, they enter something called estrus, which is a heat cycle. It's a concentration of melatonin in the blood, causing decreased progesterone levels and increased estrogen levels. The timing. Bucks and does go into season during the months of October through December. A doe usually goes into heat in November for a 24-hour period, and if she is not mated, she goes into heat approximately 28 days later. And she does this about 4 times, depending on if she gets mated or not. Next, we will come to the subject of age. For whitetail, the gestation period is around 200 days. A deer usually reaches maturity at 16 months old, meaning that's when they leave their mother. And finally, we come into the months and behaviors involved with deer being in season. The months. As I said before, the usual months that a deer is in season are October through December, and sometimes all the way up into March, depending on if they get mated or not. The reason the deer is usually in season during these months is due to the shortened days, causing the increase in melatonin due to the lesser light. Behaviors. A deer that is in season has an increased movement and activity level, meaning that they are more likely to be out and about in the evening and in the mornings. This increased activity means that there are more deer crossing roads and causing accidents, so all the more reason to be going slower on the highway. This concludes my portion, and now we come into our next subject.
Okay. This is a story of deer hunting in the state of Indiana in the United States of America, and why it is a good thing for both the deer and for the environment. The Department of Natural Resources, otherwise known as the DNR, heavily regulates the hunting of deer in the state of Indiana. You must obtain a license, and you must hunt with the proper firearm or the proper bow or crossbow. Many animal lovers think that hunting deer is a brutal and archaic sport that just has no place in today's society, but the truth could not be further from that. Natalie Van Hoos affirms that regulated deer hunts in Indiana state parks have helped restore the health of forests suffering from decades of damage caused by overabundant populations of white-tailed deer. A Purdue study shows that a research team led by Michael Jenkins, associate professor of forest ecology, found that a 17-year-long Indiana Department of Natural Resources policy of organizing hunts in state parks has successfully spurred the regrowth of native tree seedlings, herbs, and wildflowers rendered scarce by browsing deer. Jenkins said that while hunting may be unpopular with some, it is an effective means of promoting the growth and richness of Indiana's natural areas. Not only is it good for the suffering state parks, but it is also good for deer population. As we have studied in our biology class, if a population gets too large to be supported by the environment, the animals starve to death and disease sets in for the rest of the population who hasn't starved. These diseases can and do sometimes spread over into healthy populations also. This makes it bad for everybody, the deers, the humans who enjoy seeing the deer, and the hunters who enjoy hunting the deer. Van Hoos goes on to write about another study by Jenkins and Christopher Weber, a Michigan Tech University professor and Purdue alumni. Jenkins and then master's student Lindsay Jenkins, no relation, tested the effectiveness of the hunting program by comparing the amount of plant cover in 108 plots in state parks and historically hunted areas with 96 to 97 levels. They found that the total plant cover in state parks more than doubled from 96 to 97 to 2010. Herbs such as asters, violets, goldenrods increased from about 20% to 32% cover, and percent cover of grasses rose from 1 to 3%. Tree seedlings jumped from about 2% to about 13% of total plant cover, a finding that suggests when older trees die out, there will be younger trees to replace them. With heavy populations of deer, tree seedlings often don't have a chance to survive. In those situations, the forest could lose its ability to reproduce itself and eventually cease to be healthy. The study also showed that the hunting program led to recovery of native species and discouraged the spread of invasive and exotic species. We saw a striking improvement in the quality and diversity of the forest understory. In parks compared with conditions before the hunting program, the deer management program is having a clear beneficial impact on Indiana's parks and could serve as a good example for nature preserves with overabundant deer in other states. So as you can see by these studies that I have quoted, that it is in fact a really good thing to thin out the populations of deer in our state parks and also in our normal hunting grounds. It keeps the deer populations in check, which in turn cuts down on diseased animals and keeps farmers' crops from being completely destroyed. And it also promotes the health of all the plants in and around these hunted areas. So as you can clearly tell, even if you're a member of PETA or just a lover of animals, you cannot really be mad at hunters for thinning the herds, for it keeps them and the land healthy for generations to come. Thank you.